40 hours a week for the next 30 or 40 years for somebody else. I knew that I wanted to do something to create passive income, what I call mailbox money. Money that comes into your mailbox every single month without having to trade time for money. I didn't know what that would be, but I just knew that I wanted to do something to create that income so I didn't have to spend my whole life working for money. Now, as a matter of fact, when I got out of college, I never even filled out an application that had anything to do with my degree because I was afraid somebody might hire me. and if they'd have hired me, I'd have probably had a good job and I'd have probably been hooked and roped into spending the next 30 or 40 years working for somebody else. And I knew that I didn't want to do that. So I just, as a matter of fact, what I did was I got a job as a bartender so that I could support myself while I went out there and did things to create income. And you know, I see all these books that John has up here, and all of these are great books, but I look back, you know, and I think I only realized this maybe within the past 6 months to a year. But I look back, and I think there was one book that probably had me start looking at life a little different. See, I grew up, you know, my family didn't have very much money. I grew up on and I don't want this to sound like some sob story, but I grew up, you know, one of those people who grew up on a dirt road. You could see another house from where I lived, small school, so there wasn't a lot of vision. But during my career in college, I read this book right here. This is probably the book that changed the way that I looked at things. Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. But this is a book that when I read it, it gave me a belief that I could go do something. Now, it doesn't give you a vehicle, but it gave me a belief, which is real important. And I read another book, probably my last semester in college, that talked about buying real estate and creating rental income. And I thought, okay, if I had enough of rent houses, I could create that mailbox money to where I didn't have to continue to work for money. So that was my vehicle. This was the book that let me know that I could do something, and the other book was the book that let me know what the vehicle was, at least at that point in time. I'm envious of Jacob. He's 24 years old. I wish I'd have had this vehicle. Yeah. Because Ambit Energy is the best and the simplest vehicle I've ever seen in my life for somebody to create financial freedom in a short period of time. That's not a get-rich-quick deal. I didn't say you can be rich by next month or the month after that. But I see people obtaining financial freedom in this business within a year or 2 or 3. Well, what if it took you 5 years? Would it be worth it? Absolutely. It took me a lot more than 5 years to create enough of income with the real estate business so I didn't have to work for money anymore. It wasn't fun. It was real hard. It took me a long time, and I wasn't able to take anybody with me. But I was fortunate and lucky that somebody exposed me to this type of business, which was Excel Communications back in the early 1990s. I was lucky. Because that vehicle, when I learned about that vehicle, what I realized was you could create a lot of money a lot quicker, you could have a whole lot of fun, and you could take a whole lot of people with you. That's a whole lot different than the real estate business that we did. And so, again, I'm envious of Jacob. He's 24 years old. He's just getting started in life. And within a few years, as Mary said, or Richard, you know, he very well may be able to take the rest of his life off. Many of us in this room are already past the midpoint of our lives. Great place, Jacob. You know, here's a guy, and there's many others. You know, there's Jordan, that are so young, and you know, I just hope, and I know Jordan does. I just hope that they recognize what they have hold of. This business can change your life by putting you in a position to where you don't have to trade time for money. Maybe you've already seen, I have a great aversion to trading time for money and having a job. I don't want to have a job. I don't want anybody to tell me when I can go to work or when I have to be to work on Monday morning, or tell me when I can go to lunch. I just can't imagine living that kind of a life. And I think maybe really, truly, it's probably this book that gave me that belief that maybe you didn't have to work for somebody else for the rest of your life. Life's too short to spend it working for somebody else. Especially if you have a vehicle, something that you can do and use and go spend some time and create that income that comes into your mailbox every single month. And it was either Richard or Barry talked about the value of creating that passive income. And if people could just realize what they're creating here rather than trading time for money, and if it took you 5 years, it would be worth it. Because let me just give you an example. If you only created $4,000 a month in passive income, what I call mailbox money, that would be the equivalent of if you went out and made $1 million in your job or whatever it is that you do, and you put that $1 million cash in the bank, and you could get the bank to pay you 5%, they would pay you $4,000 a month. Now, how many, if you think about it, how many people do you know is ever going to be able to save $1 million cash after taxes and put it in the bank and live off the interest? Not many. Not very many people. But this simple little vehicle that we have here, Ambit Energy, every single one of you can create a lot more than $4,000 a month coming into your mailbox every single month. There's a lot of people that have passive, residual, Ambit Energy incomes like they already have millions of dollars cash in the bank. Like they got $10, $20, $30 million in the bank that they've gone out and made. You'd have never been able to make that kind of money. To put that money in the bank, but you can create that money here. You can live off of this kind of money like you're millionaires. You don't have to have $1 million. It's about having the money that comes into your mailbox every single month, and you can live like you've got millions of dollars in the bank. Does that make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Mm-hmm.
You know, I talked about, I talked about being exposed to Excel communications and that changing my life and changing the way that I looked at making money. I mean, I knew how I wanted to have the money coming in. This put me in a different direction as to how to create that kind of a money. And Excel was that vehicle. And, but I was lucky. I was real lucky. You're all lucky that somebody has exposed you to this business. But I was lucky that somebody exposed me to that business, and the guy's name was Lane Winston. Nobody, everybody looks back now and says, boy, I wish I'd have got in Excel or whatever, John knows about Excel. But when you get into something like that, you don't know how you're going to do. You don't know anything about that kind of business. That's the only time I've ever done that kind of a business. Nobody, hindsight's 20/20. We didn't know that it was become the phenomenally successful business story that it became. And it was. It became the youngest company ever to create $1 billion a year in U.S. in revenue. Faster than Walmart, Xerox, IBM, and even Microsoft. We didn't know that in the beginning. In the beginning, they didn't have 100 customers. They didn't have 1,000 customers. But they became a phenomenally successful business story. Because I happened to be in the right place at the right time, I, along with a lot of other people, it changed our lives financially. To the point where I created that enough of income to where I didn't really have to do anything else. But fortunately, again, somebody exposed me to Jerry Thompson and what was going to happen here with the electricity business. And during my career in Excel, we always thought about and talked about maybe doing electricity the same way we did long distance. But it just never happened. But I was always intrigued with the electricity part because I knew that it would be bigger. You see, in Excel, many of us made millions of dollars being paid pennies on a $20 average long distance bill. But with electricity bills being $250, I knew the money could be bigger. And so I looked at it, met Jerry Thompson, and I saw in Jerry Thompson the same kind of CEO as what built Excel to the phenomenally successful business story it was. So I decided to come out of retirement. Now, no, I didn't. I had a pretty good idea that it was going to be a successful company. I felt pretty confident that Jerry Thompson would create a $1 billion company and probably a multi-billion-dollar company. But even though I was lucky in Excel, at least going into this one, I had a really good idea because I'd already had this crystal ball because everything was kind of similar, except the numbers were bigger here. Numbers were a lot bigger here. And every month I see that those numbers are a lot bigger. So saying that, you know, you're all lucky. You really are that somebody has exposed you to this business, because this business can change your family's financial picture forever. And if you're working a job, it can get you out of having to work that job. Now, I know it's hard for people to maybe recognize or understand that, but this business can change your life. It's not a get-rich-quick deal. You got to make sacrifices. You got to make sacrifices. And speaking of making sacrifices, like Mary was talking about a while ago, I'm going to go into talking about ambition here too, because when she talked about making those sacrifices, driving the car to New York, staying in those hostels or whatever you call them, it reminded me of stories in Excel, people trying to create money, and I remember the #1 income earner in Excel talking about the sacrifices that he would make just to get to the yearly convention. They would stay in a hotel way across town that was a lot less expensive, with 4 or 5 guys or 6 guys in a hotel room. They made those sacrifices, but they went. They went to the yearly convention, and this guy is the only person in Excel Communications that made over $1 million a month. But you see, he's a regular guy just like the rest of us. He made those sacrifices. He did whatever it took to be there, to do the things that it takes to get to where he wanted to go. So I want all of you to go. The single most important thing that I feel like that you can do for your business is to be an ambition. I'm going to say that again, because the single most important thing you can do for your business is to be an ambition. So make whatever sacrifices it is. I have people tell me, well, I have to work. Well, figure out how to not have to work. Take off, take a vacation day, take 2 vacation days. Tell somebody that you will work for them 2 days for every day that they have to take off for you, or you have to take off for them. Figure out what it takes. Well, I got a birthday party, or I've got something. The only excuse that I think is valid to me is if the doctor were to tell you that if you go, you might die. To me, that's the only excuse. Because I'm assuming that you're in this business to change your family's financial picture. And if I'm telling you, and trust me, I would not be telling you this unless I would do it myself, or if I didn't think that it was one of the most important things that you can do for your business. So, if it is the most important thing you can do for your business, figure out how to be there. Okay, enough on that. John knows I do this all the time. That's how important that I feel like that it is. I guess now I'd like to just have all of you ask me whatever questions you want to do. A few weeks ago, many of us talked about like stepping it up a level here and making a big push towards ambition. So I made a commitment to do some things and do some meetings around the country, and some of these things I'm going to do what I call like a fireside chat. And I did my first one Wednesday night at a home meeting in Houston with about 30 people, sitting in the living room, and they actually even fired up the fireplace even though it's 100 degrees. We didn't leave the fireplace on very long.